Welcome to the debate. Did you know that enthusiastically telling your best friend about your ambitious new goal actually reduces your mathematical chances of achieving it?
Which is completely counterintuitive, by the way. I mean, we usually assume that public declarations create accountability, right?
Exactly. You draw up the blueprints, you stand in the public square, and you declare exactly what you intend to build.
Right, assuming that the social pressure will sort of force you to execute. But we are exploring a psychological phenomenon today that entirely upends how we view human motivation.
Yeah, it's perfectly illustrated in that classic story of a young man named Simon. And I think Simon's situation is something almost everyone listening has experienced in one form or another.
Oh, absolutely. So just to recap for anyone who hasn't looked at the material recently, Simon lived in a small village and became infamous for these grand declarations. Like one week, he'd march through the market shouting that he was going to open the biggest shop in the village.
And then the very next week, he's gathering crowds in the square, loudly promising to master pottery.
Right, he's going to make the most beautiful clay vessels. And the villagers, they clapped, they smiled, they showered him with praise, and yet...
his hands remained completely empty.
Exactly. He never laid a single brick. He never even touched a piece of clay.
Because by the time morning came, the time to actually do the hard labor, he was inexplicably exhausted, which introduces the core mechanism we're analyzing today, social reality substitution.
Yes.
It's this phenomenon where the act of talking about a goal tricks the brain into feeling as though the goal has, already been achieved.
And it is an incredibly pervasive trap. I mean, especially in our modern era of constant digital broadcasting, it presents us with a profound question about why we so often fail to execute on our heavily publicized goals.
Right. So the central question for our debate is this. When we fail to act after announcing our intentions, is it primarily because we are functionally exhausting our internal drive, literally depleting our finite energy reserves through the act of speaking?
Or, and this will be my stance, is it because our brain's reward system has been completely hijacked, like replacing the reality of hard work with the premature satisfaction of social praise?
Yeah. So I will argue that this failure is fundamentally an issue of energy conservation. Basically, speaking acts as a pressure release valve that just vents out the required drive.
And I'll be arguing that the failure is rooted in the cheap dopamine trap, where these unearned neurochemical rewards pacify the hunger required for the actual execution phase.
All right, let me ground my perspective in the physics of motivation. I view human drive as a deeply finite resource. It operates very much like steam inside a pressure cooker.
Okay, pressure cooker.
Yeah, think about it. If you want to move the heavy piston of actual physical action, you need immense internal pressure. When we look at Simon walking through the village market shouting about his future shop, we have to recognize the biological cost of that behavior.
The cost of just talking?
Yes, he is opening the release valve. Every single time he broadcasts his plans, he vents out the inner heat required to actually do the labor. I mean, we often falsely separate speech from physical effort, but the cognitive load of emotional broadcasting is huge.
Right, but
generating the enthusiasm to convince a crowd, painting a vivid picture of the future, it is highly taxing. Speaking is consumption, right? Doing is accumulation. So by the time he woke up, the pressure cooker was completely empty.
Look, I mean, your thermodynamic metaphor is elegant, sure, but viewing motivation purely as steam, it completely misses the evolutionary biology beneath social reality substitution.
How so?
Because we are dealing with a severe evolutionary mismatch here. The human brain evolved to release dopamine, the feel-good hormone, when we accomplish something that aids our survival or elevates our social standing within the tribe.
Sure, standard evolutionary psychology.
Right, but language, and particularly performative language, allows us to hack that ancient system. When the villagers clapped for Simon, his brain was flooded with dopamine. He felt proud and important immediately.
He felt like he'd already done the work?
Exactly. He received the exact same neurochemical reward he would have received had he actually spent 6 months building the shop.
So you're saying the brain literally couldn't tell the difference between the story and the reality?
Precisely. The energy wasn't vented away into the ether like steam. His biological imperative to act was simply neutralized. Think of it like eating a massive bag of junk food an hour before a nutritious dinner.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right? Your stomach isn't depleted of its ability to process food. It's just been tricked into feeling full by empty calories. The brain simply said, well, we already have the social status we desired. Why would we go out in the hot sun and lay heavy clay? The actual work became obsolete to a brain that had already received its chemical paycheck.
Okay, but if we follow that logic, we run into a glaring contradiction with the elder's specific diagnosis in the source material.
Contradiction?
Yeah, when the elder finally confronts Simon, he explicitly tells him, and I quote, "The energy you need for action gets wasted in words."
Sure, but
I think we have to take that literally. If we view human stamina as a battery, emotional broadcasting heavily drains that battery. Think about the stamina required for what we might call stealth mode labor.
stealth mode, right?
The quiet, unglamorous, uncelebrated grind of actually learning a craft like pottery. It requires immense cognitive reserves. When Simon wakes up tired the morning after his grand announcement, it is a genuine deficit of energy. He has emptied the battery on the performance of the idea, leaving absolutely nothing for the execution.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go for it.
If this were purely an issue of energetic depletion, like he simply drained his battery, as you say, then resting for a day would logically solve the problem.
Well, not necessarily.
Now think about it. He would sleep, recharge his battery, and start throwing clay the next afternoon. But he doesn't do that. He abandons the pottery project entirely until a no different dream arises.
Simon didn't fail because he lacked physical or even cognitive energy. He failed because his criteria for joy were severely misaligned. The text specifically notes that Simon felt proud and successful before he even started. This is what we categorize as stage 1 joy.
Wait, break down stage 1 joy for me in this context. Are we talking about like the fleeting hit of a social media like versus the deep satisfaction of actually finishing a marathon?
That is exactly the distinction. Stage 1 joy is volatile, it is entirely external, and it is temporary. It's the rush of someone commenting congratulations on a LinkedIn post announcing a startup that hasn't written a single line of code yet.
Right.
Tragedy is that the applause made the work entirely unnecessary in his own mind. He had decoupled the reward from the effort. The GPS was tricked into telling him he was already parked in the driveway, so he just turned the car off.
Okay, I understand the distinction you are making, and the junk food analogy is strong. But you are totally dismissing the sheer exhausting weight of maintaining a public persona.
I'm not dismissing it,
Even if we acknowledge the dopamine spike from stage 1 joy, dopamine itself is a major energy regulator. When you announce a goal, you aren't just getting a quick hit of validation. You are actively constructing an outward persona of future success.
Which takes some effort, yes.
It takes a lot of effort. Let's map this to your modern examples. When you post that you are starting a new, rigorous fitness program, you now have to manage the comments, you have to project confidence when friends ask about it.
True.
You have to uphold the image of the person who is getting fit. Maintaining that facade requires a continuous, heavy expenditure of executive function.
Fair enough.
So the exhaustion Simon feels the next morning isn't just physical fatigue, it is the profound cognitive drain of realizing the massive gap between the image he's sold to the village and the zero progress he has actually made. The pressure cooker has been vented, the steam is gone.
Well, I will certainly grant that maintaining a facade is taxing. And sure, cognitive dissonance creates fatigue, but you are still treating the drive as something that leaked out, rather than something that was actively and systematically tricked into shutting down.
It's a depletion either way.
No, it is deception, not depletion. When his mind thinks the goal is already achieved, it suppresses the stress hormones, like the focused, productive anxiety that actually initiate difficult labor. He is pacified.
Then how do we interpret the elder's garden demonstration?
Okay, let's look at the garden.
Because if we look at the biological reality of the metaphor the elder uses, it strongly supports the concept of vulnerability and the absolute need for a protective incubation ecosystem.
Okay, lay it out.
The elder takes one seed and buries it deep in the dark soil, watering it quietly. Then he takes the second seed and places it entirely exposed on a bare rock. And what happens?
The birds get it.
It dries in the sun, and the birds steal pieces of it until nothing is left. This is a brilliant illustration of the external risks of sharing an idea prematurely. An unexecuted goal has a very fragile skeleton. When you expose it to the harsh elements of public opinion, you invite toxic skepticism or even overly optimistic advice that distorts your original vision.
Yeah.
Ideas, just like seeds, require darkness, silence, and isolation to establish the root structure without the crushing weight of public expectation.
I come at it from a different way.
Really? How else can you read that?
If we look closely at what the elder actually did in that garden, he didn't just passively place the seed on a rock to demonstrate environmental hazards. His actions were highly deliberate and, crucially, performative.
Performative?
He was just showing Simon. He explicitly called the children over. He held the seed up high for an audience and said, "Look, everyone, I have a seed. Soon it will become a beautiful tree. Watch how wonderful it will be." He intentionally generated applause and smiles from those children.
Wait, so you are arguing the applause is what actually killed the seed, not the sun or the birds?
Yes, the seed didn't die simply because it was exposed to the elements. It died because it was actively used as a prop for attention. The danger highlighted here isn't just external elements stealing the idea.
Then what is it?
The danger is the creator prioritizing the announcement over the cultivation. The elder is showing Simon a direct reflection of his own behavior. He's commodifying the potential of an idea for immediate social currency. By making a show of the seed, the elder proved that the performance of the tree replaced the planting of the tree.
Okay, that interpretation makes the elder's actions much more pointed, I'll admit, but it completely ignores the biological necessity of the soil itself. The sun drying the seed and the birds taking it are real mechanisms of destruction in the text.
Metaphorically, sure.
To me, this reinforces that silence provides the necessary soil. When we are in the early stages of any endeavor, whether it's building a business, transforming our health, or mastering a new skill, we need a rigorous dialogue with ourselves, not a focus group.
Right. Stealth mode.
Exactly. When Simon's ideas were exposed on the proverbial rock of the village square, they were completely unprotected. The incubation ecosystem isn't just about avoiding cheap dopamine. It's about providing a physical and mental barrier that keeps the fragile early stages of an idea safe from the consuming nature of the outside world.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that the outside world in this metaphor is actually supplying the very validation that stunts the growth?
What do you mean?
The children clapping for the seed is the exact parallel to the villagers clapping for the shop. The elders demonstrating that the moment you extract social value from an unearned achievement, you strip it of its ability to become actualized. The children are celebrating a tree that does not exist.
Right.
And because they are celebrating it, the elder leaves it on the rock. If the reward has already been harvested, planting the seed becomes a redundant chore.
Well, let's test these two frameworks against Simon's eventual breakthrough then. Because after this confrontation with the elder, Simon fundamentally changes his behavior.
He finally does the work.
Right. He decides to build a wooden chair. And he implements what we might call a strict done then discuss policy. He tells absolutely no one in the village. He works in total secrecy. And I argue that this silence was the strategic concentration of his resources.
Concentrating the steam.
Exactly. By keeping his mouth shut, he conserved all his time, intellect, and emotional energy and focused them into a single point of impact, his hands and the wood. Furthermore, building in silence gave him the operational freedom to make mistakes.
Oh, operational freedom is a huge advantage. Because when you build in public, every mistake is a public humiliation.
Exactly. When you are in stealth mode, a mistake is just data. He could build, fail, fix the chair leg, pivot, all without an audience watching his missteps or offering unsolicited advice. Silence was his strategy to keep the pressure bottled up until the work was genuinely complete. It provided the structural container that made grueling repetition possible.
Look, the freedom to fail without an audience is certainly a practical benefit. I'm not denying that. But the true triumph of the wooden chair isn't just that he concentrated his resources or avoided public humiliation.
Then what is it?
The triumph is the profound shift in his neurobiology. It's his discovery of stage 2 joy. When Simon finally sat on that finished chair in his quiet home, The text tells us he felt real pride. Not the pride that comes from words, but the pride that comes from doing.
The permanent kind.
Yes, this is solid, internal, permanent satisfaction. He transitioned entirely away from social validation toward intrinsic worth.
But see, he didn't know what stage 2 joy felt like when he started. So how did he get through the grueling middle phase?
By not getting cheap dopamine.
No, he had to physically go to a quiet corner every evening after his daily labor. He had to face exhaustion. What kept him going wasn't the anticipation of a neurochemical state he had never experienced. What kept him going was that the pressure hadn't been vented.
I disagree.
Because no one knew, he had no external persona to uphold, but he retained 100% of his internal drive.
He had the drive precisely because he wasn't siphoning it off with the cheap dopamine of the villagers' praise. Think about it. Before, with the pottery in the shop, he felt finished before he began.
Right.
With the chair, because the village was silent, his brain registered the undeniable reality: the chair does not exist yet. You are sitting on the floor. Therefore, the biological imperative to create the chair remained fully intact.
He wasn't tricked.
Right. He was no longer a victim of social reality substitution. The silence forced his brain to live in the actual reality of an unfinished project, which meant his psychological hunger stayed sharp.
He learned the philosophy of, let your success be the noise.
Let your success be the noise. Yeah, that perfectly captures the transition. He realizes that when a product, whether it's a physical chair, a new skill, or a transformed physique, is actually complete, it possesses its own gravity. Right. I mean, when the neighbor finally sees the chair at the end of the story, the validation is an inevitable byproduct of the reality Simon created, rather than a goal he had to desperately chase through the market.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to convince anyone he is a craftsman. The chair does the convincing for him.
Which brings us to a really fascinating synthesis, I think. We are clearly looking at two highly interconnected mechanisms at play when we fail to execute on our declared goals.
Definitely.
From my perspective, Simon's initial failures and his eventual success underscore the absolute necessity of energy conservation. Motivation is a highly volatile, finite resource. When we speak our dreams aloud, we act as a release valve, venting the internal pressure required for the arduous execution phase.
And the silence is the pressure cooker.
Right. Silence is the essential pressure cooker. It is the protective soil, that incubation ecosystem that shields our fragile ideas from external interference and allows us to concentrate our raw fuel into a single point of impact.
And, from my perspective, the core danger is the psychological deception of the cheap dopamine trap. When we announce our intentions and receive praise, we trigger a premature neurochemical celebration.
The junk food.
Exactly, the empty calories. We suffer from social reality substitution, where our brains literally mistake the validation of the plan for the completion of the work. So silence isn't just about saving energy. It is the necessary shield against premature satisfaction.
It forces the delay of gratification.
Yes, pushing us through the difficult execution phase until we can access that stage 2 joy, that solid, permanent pride that comes intrinsically from the doing rather than externally from the applause.
Well, despite our different framing, there is a profound point of convergence here. We both entirely agree on the critical danger of social reality substitution.
100%.
Whether it is fundamentally draining your energy reserves or hijacking your biological reward system, the act of broadcasting unearned achievements is deeply detrimental to actualizing them. We both recognize the sheer necessity of operating in stealth mode.
Protecting an idea until it possesses its own structural integrity. Precisely. The evolution of Simon from a loud dreamer to a quiet master craftsman, it's a testament to the power of letting the work speak for itself.
Absolutely.
It is a fundamental shift from using words to build an image, to using results to build a tangible legacy. Real success doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation.
It is a remarkable upgrade to our daily operating philosophy. Don't brag about the blueprint of your mansion while you haven't even laid the first brick. Build in silence until one day the lights in the windows speak for themselves, drawing the world's attention without you having to say a single word.
Well said.
Which leaves us with a fascinating, highly practical challenge drawn directly from the text. For everyone listening, If there is a project, a goal, or a dream that you are deeply tempted to post about on social media, or even just tell a friend about tonight over dinner,
Try keeping it an absolute secret for just one more week.
yes, adopt the done then discuss policy. Observe yourself. See how much more raw fuel you have for the actual work when you refuse to open that release valve.
It is a profound experiment in delayed gratification. Watch what happens to your focus when you deny your brain that cheap dopamine. It will force you to seek the reward in the work itself.
It really will. We are going to leave it there for today. The dynamic between internal drive and external validation is incredibly complex, and the story of the quiet craftsman offers layers of insight that reward deep personal experimentation. Thank you for joining us on the debate.